Hi everyone. Okay, this is attempt number 2 to go live with Tracie Miles from the Eve appeal. We had a little bit of a connectivity issue just then. So yeah, we are hoping to go live with Tracie in just a moment. I can see that she's requested to join, so I'm going to bring her in. Again, these things always happen with lives. Every time. Hello, how are we doing?
Hello.
Is that better?
Yes.
Okay, fingers crossed. Okay, I want to race ahead to
Okay.
try and say stuff before we lose connection again. Welcome to Tracie Miles, who is the gynae cancer nurse specialist from the Eve appeal. And May is Get Lippy month for the Eve appeal, and that is when we really try and raise awareness of the symptoms of gynae cancers and just make sure people are really, really informed. And the work of the Eve appeal is really important. So Tracie, could you just tell us a little bit about what you do for the Eve appeal, and perhaps a little bit about your career in general? What's led you to this point?
Thank you. Yes, the wonderful Eve appeal. So I've been working with them for nearly 4 years now, managing with my super sidekick. Actually, she's my sort of work daughter, if you like. And if you go onto the Eve appeal, you'll see her on our website, Karen Hobbs. She had cancer, cervix cancer. She knows what it's all about. I know what it's all about from the aspect of being a nurse specialist. I'll explain that quickly because of our time that we have. Thanks to the gods of cyberspace, I'm chatting to you now. But with the Eve appeal, what I do is I chat to people like yourself, people who are worried about cancer, people who want to know more about cancer. Awareness, you've nailed it. The more we know, the more likely we are to report to our doctors, the more likely we are to get treated sooner. That saves lives. So whether you're Adam or Eve, so it's boys and girls, I want to talk to everybody. And the people who care about them. So that's what I do. I run this, it's a support information line. So it's not really a helpline, but information helps. Information is power. So Karen and I run awareness raising events, joining in with wonderful people like you who care about others in different ways, about caring about skin. I care about skin. I care about cervix skin. I care about vulval skin. I care about vaginal skin. I'll say clitoris without blushing. I'll talk about anything gynae that will help women and the men that care about them and the other women that care about them get to the doctors if there's something wrong. So my mantra is #know your normal. If you don't know your normal, you don't know you're abnormal.
And when I say you know your stuff, I mean, how many years are we talking that you've been working in the gynaecological cancer space?
Well, unfortunately, I never found your products in time. So the wrinkles tell you all. 38 years in nursing, 20 years in gynae cancer nursing. So my PhD is in gynae cancer nursing and the side effects. My postdoc work in all of that. I sit in a number of parliamentary committees. I dabble and meddle in everything until people listen to me about how we need to get messages out to women. So yeah, a long time.
Amazing.
I'm still working in the NHS now, so that keeps me very current.
Yeah, amazing. Well, thank you so much for being here today and sharing your knowledge with us. And what I'm hoping is that this will be a really practical and informative session, something that people can rewatch, watch whenever they've got a moment, and to inform people about symptoms, about screening options, maybe a bit of myth busting, because I love a bit of myth busting. First of all, could you just tell us about the Ask Eve service in particular? Because I'd love to kind of raise awareness of that service. Not very many people, I don't think, know about it. What does it offer? Who is it for? How do they get in touch?
It's for everybody and anybody who wants to get in touch with us. So that's Adam or Eve, people who are worried about themselves or people who are worried about people that they love or care about. 2 ways of getting in touch with us. Simply put the Eve appeal into your Google browser and you will find us, Ask Eve, and you can either email us, so that makes it super anonymous, because although we've got your email, it's confidential. It's only Karen and I that I was telling you about that are going to see it, or send us your phone number and we'll call you back. Usually within about 3 days. It's not an instant turnaround because, as I said, I work in the NHS as well. Only Karen and I, the rest of the Eve team are absolutely amazing, but they can't see that account.
So it really is just the two of you that run the service. That's amazing.
Yep. And if we don't know the answers, then we've got a panel of experts that we can go out and find. So I'm constantly chatting to colleagues, experts, and saying, just want to run this past you. I
Mm.
never use the name of the person or the people that have called in,
Sure.
because that's the whole point, keeping it confidential. So yes, sort of 38 years in nursing, 20 years in gynae cancer, lots of friends and experts. We usually find the answer for people.
Brilliant. I bet you do. I definitely believe you do. Right. Let's talk about symptoms.
Yeah.
And perhaps there are 5 gynae cancers. Let's just run through them. Let's talk about the 5 gynae cancers individually, what the symptoms are, what people should be looking for.
Great idea. Loving this. So I'm going to start with ovarian cancer. The reason being is it's probably the most non-specific of the symptoms. And actually the symptoms are, the key thing here is persistence. So let me describe. You've got bloating. You've got a change in bowel habit. You've got a thickened waist. So your skirts or your trousers or your belt, you're having to put up another notch. You might be feeling full sooner than normal. Well, I'm kind of describing myself when I was pregnant.
Well, I'm also just wondering, like, how do people distinguish between perhaps,
Exactly.
you know, there's a bit of a lockdown belly going on. Well, certainly in this house there is. There's a bit of a perimenopause, menopausal belly thing that happens. How do we work out what's what?
So the key thing, and you've actually nailed it there, is persistence. So if these symptoms aren't going away, so they're carrying on 3 weeks or more, so it's not due to something you ate, it's not due to, say, IBS. Now, IBS tends to start in the younger woman. Ovary cancer actually tends to be in the older woman, the woman of my age, sort of the postmenopausal woman. That's not a complete, but majority of women. So if it's persistent bloating, persistent change in bowel habits, persistent widening of girth, that you can't put down to the lockdown belly or eating too many chocolates on a regular basis, which is the lockdown belly, really, isn't it? Actually, mine's Sauvignon Blanc, but we won't go there with salt and pepper crisp, but revealing far too much about myself. So it's the persistent and unexplained. And it's probably nothing, but it's something we'd much rather you went and reported to your GP. There's one other with ovarian cancer now that we add in, family history. If you have a family history of breast and ovarian cancer, or prostate cancer in the younger male part of your family, that can indicate there may be a genetic link with that too. It's something I'm very passionate about, genetics. So
interesting. So the reason I'm here today, VOTARY is here today, is because of my mum, who died of ovarian cancer, well, just under 2 years ago now. And she was 74. And she took herself off to the doctor because she was feeling really tired. And she was bloated, but I think she probably just thought she'd put on weight. And she took herself off to the doctor, and she's quite a sort of strong-willed woman. And she walked into the doctor's office and she said, "I've got diabetes. You need to give me a test for diabetes." I don't know where she had got that from, but she'd obviously been on Google. And he duly tested it. He looked at her notes, and he actually said to her, "Look, you've got what I call thin note syndrome. You're never in here. So for that reason, I am going to give you a test for diabetes, even though I don't usually succumb to demands." And she didn't have diabetes, at which point he, in a subsequent appointment, he felt her abdomen and sent her off for scans, and at which point they discovered that she had tumours in her ovaries, but also they were all over her pelvis, and they'd gone into her liver. So she was stage 4 terminal. And she at that point took what I think was incredibly brave and selfless decision, difficult for her loved ones. She decided she didn't want any treatment. She didn't walk into a hospital from that scan onwards, and she went home and she decided she was just going to get her affairs in order and really enjoy her last few months with us. But I think it's interesting to tell personal stories, because one of my regrets, we said pretty much everything to each other in those last few months, but I didn't really ask her about her symptoms. And of course, that's what's in my head now as her daughter. I'm like, well, but how long was it going on for? And if she looked back, was she feeling a bit under the weather maybe a couple of years before that? So that's why I think it's so important to talk about symptoms, and before it's too late.
I absolutely agree. What's your mum's name?
Annabelle. So
Annabelle's left this amazing legacy, in that she's got you talking to me to actually help the Annabelles of the future. So thumbs up for your mum.
Via Caroline Hirons, I should say.
Absolutely,
because I definitely
yeah.
heard about the Evil through Caroline, and it was because we were in her kit last autumn.
Yeah.
And I'm sure anyone who's watching who knows Caroline knows that she does these fantastic codes. Any brands in her kit, she does these codes, and you know, it's crazy time for brands. I mean, it's our biggest promotion of the year. We all kind of gird ourselves in the warehouse, you know, staffed to the hilt. And so we made a further donation after that kit to the Eve Appeal. I just made a donation, and then someone very lovely from the Eve Appeal called me and said, who are you? Please tell me who you are and why you've made this donation. And it's just brilliant to be working with you guys. And I'm sure you know that we have the lip gloss that we're doing 10% of sales as part of the Get Lippy month. So yeah, hopefully it's the start of a longer term relationship with you guys. But I mustn't get distracted from, we were on ovarian, and then I told my mum's story because she had ovarian cancer. But is there anything else to say on ovarian, or should we move on?
I would love to carry on talking about your mum forever, because I could learn so much from you about how it feels and her legacy. So that'll be another conversation,
Another one.
you and me one day. Really looking forward to that. So that was Annabelle's story in ovarian cancer, and your mum's presentation is very, very typical. So that was really useful to use Annabelle's story. So let's talk about typical presentations. So if we have a womb cancer, which is the most common of all the gynae cancers. So usually with a womb cancer, it's the endometrial lining. So that's the tissue that we shed every month, called a period, all the way through our lives, pretty much, unless we're having babies or taking a pill. So we're so super used to bleeding. It's just what we do. Julie Covington sang Only Women Bleed. Of course, all of you are far too young to know that song, apart from one or two of you. But, you know, it's just... so we normalise bleeding, very much so.
Yeah.
And then we have a menopause, which means we stop having our regular periods. So we shouldn't bleed after the menopause. So our normal is after menopause, no more bleeding. Our normal is in between periods, no bleeding, unless we're fiddling around with hormonal contraception, for example. So if we get bleeding after our menopause, get it checked, girlfriend, because it's not that last.
Any type of bleeding. So that could be just a little bit of spotting, or just anything that isn't totally clear, I guess.
Absolutely. So now I'm going to use my favourite word, discharge.
Yeah.
So some people it's quite a word, but you're absolutely right. Bleeding and a signal of cancers, which is also cervix, which we'll go over in a minute, with womb cancer, it's not necessarily that sort of Snow White moment where, like my lippy badge, you've got the red lips on a very white gusset or a panty liner, for example, making that analogy. It's not always like that. Quite often it can just be like a bit of smudgy brown, you know, that stuff you get at the end of the period, well, from when I had them, that kind of thing. So anything that's not your normal, every single woman looks at her gusset pretty much every day. I know she does.
Yeah.
We don't go to the loo.
Come on.
We go to the loo and we look down. So you all know what your normal discharge is.
And also, can I just say, we're generally, sadly, the ones putting the washers on. So, you know, we're definitely looking.
Exactly. So if you get a change in your discharge, it is probably nothing. Seriously, it is probably something hormonal, meaning you're perimenopausal or just postmenopausal. It also means after menopause that you could have this condition, which is a normal thing called vaginal atrophy, which is where as skin gets dry on the outside, I'm telling the skin gurus here, this is terribly embarrassing about drying skin and aging skin. But when I relate it to vagina, I know my stuff. So when that dries, the products that you use when you change on your skin as your skin gets older, the same sort of thing happens in the vagina. And often you can get debris in skin that just ends up on that panty liner or gusset, and that's normal discharge.
I did not know that.
There you go. You see, we can trade skin facts. I shall have you on the phone all day. So much to talk about. But that's the thing with discharge. So anything that's new, hashtag know your normal. If your discharge changes, report it to the GP. If you get a period when your periods have stopped, report it to the GP. So that's essentially womb cancer, cervix cancer. If you bleed in between your periods after sex, for example, that's quite a classic. That shouldn't be happening. It can be a sign of an early cervix cancer. So my mate Karen, she bled loads after sex. She'll tell you all about it. She'll make you all laugh. She's a comedian as well, and she makes it hilariously funny. But she gets a message across, which is good.
Yeah, she's
amazing. She's brilliant. If you get bleeding in between periods or after sex, i.e. when you're not expecting to have that period, go get it checked out.
Mm,
It's probably nothing.
And what?
Go on.
I suspect that a lot of people are resistant. There's an embarrassment factor about going to a GP.
Yeah.
But I also think a part of it is that they don't necessarily trust that the GP is going to give it the attention, or I don't know how to describe. You know what I'm trying to say? They don't necessarily, they think they might be dismissed by the GP for worrying about nothing. What should the GP be looking for? And what sort of questions should the GP be asking people?
Okay, so we'll cover that off, but just to say, on our website, we've got a top tips for going to the GP, a sort of a list of hints and tips of what you should say to your GP, so that you don't get to put your hand on the door of the GP surgery and it's like, oh damn, I forgot to tell you this, that and the other.
Oh, I have to make a list. I have to write it down.
Exactly. So we've got a top tips list there, but the important thing is give your GP permission to do a visual inspection, which is medical jargon for be prepared to say to your GP, look, you know, although I might find this embarrassing, I might find it, tell them how you feel. But give them, say, you know, I am actually prepared to have a vaginal examination. There, said the word vagina. Let them know that you're giving permission, because quite often, and we hear this from GPs, they feel they want to be kind to you and that you're worried and you're embarrassed. So they'll take your whole history and then they'll think, oh, do you know,
it's probably nothing.
It's probably nothing. And actually, it's probably due to this. So poor girl, I won't examine her. Be prepared to let them know you take your knickers off.
Yeah.
Get yourself examined. You've got yourself that far. It's excruciatingly embarrassing, possibly. It's the last thing you want to do. You haven't got time to, it's taken you ages to get to the GP because something called COVID's got in the way. Heard about that, yeah? So now you're there, get it done in one go.
And actually, really good point about, because we're on cervical cancer, I think.
We are.
They are still screening, even in the middle of the lockdown last year. They were still screening, and so don't miss it if you get your letter. I had mine in the middle of last year, and I went, and I was just really it felt really lovely that they were still doing it. I felt really quite weirdly excited that that part of the world was still turning. Yeah, really good. And actually, I love, sorry, there was just something on the Eva Peel website that sort of made me laugh. I think it's worth talking about, where you say don't be embarrassed if you haven't had a bikini wax, or if you're worried about how, you know, your vulva looks, or it's one of those things. And I think that's relevant in the context of lockdown, because of course no one's been going to get their bikini waxes for months and months. So please don't be embarrassed about it. It's totally normal.
Absolutely. We really we do care, but we don't mind. We do care about you, but we don't mind what you look like when you take your knickers off. We just want you to get there, take your knickers off. Let's do the complete visual inspection, because quite often we'll finish the cervix and we'll move on to the others. But quite often with cervix, you can get bleeding, which is called collision bleeding, which sounds just like, what is she on about? When the penis or sex toy or your girlfriend's finger hits the top of your cervix, if you're on the pill, you may have a thing called an ectropion. It's a normal thing. It's just a very vascular cervix. Toy, penis, finger got far enough with deep penetration, you are likely to bleed. It's not cancer, but you don't know unless somebody checks it out. So super important. So we've gone
ovarian, womb, cervical, I think.
Cervix. We'll now do vulva and vagina together because they're the rarest. Vagina being more rare than vulva. So let's talk about, so vulval cancer is a skin cancer. Okay, so if we catch that cancer early, we can treat it sometimes with just creams, but generally with removing the skin under an anaesthetic. Okay, girls. So but if we don't treat it and we leave it, that skin cancer will spread and it can get into the lymph nodes. And then we start looking at chemotherapy and radiotherapy, and that is really hard work. It still can be curable, but believe me, I don't want you to get that far. I don't want anybody to get cancer.
So if it's a skin, so is it a sort of a melanoma?
So we do see vaginal melanomas. That's different again. Melanomas tend to have more of a black appearance, but it's really good to mention that, because actually melanomas are more obvious. If you are looking at your vulva on a regular basis, here we go. This is my challenge to all of you. I bet some of you bother to check your boobs sometimes in the shower, sometimes. I bet none of you, or very few of you, check your vulvas, Okay, so if we were all in a room, this is my party piece if I'm doing a talk, and I say to everybody, right, everybody look around the room, we're talking about checking vulvas now, and thinking, oh my goodness. And then I say, right, look at everybody's noses, and everybody looks at everybody's noses. They're all different. I say, now vulvas, and I say, I'm not going to get you all to share vulvas. You can if you like, but I don't want to get into trouble. But every woman's vulva looks different, just as every woman's nose looks different.
Yeah.
So if you don't know what your normal looks like, and you go to Google to check a normal, you're not find it. Yours is more beautiful than anybody else's. Ask your partner, okay?
Yeah.
But actually look at it yourself. You don't have to be brilliant at Pilates. I'm not. That's what mirrors are for. Just get an idea. Oh, well, honestly, I've got my daughter-in-law sat on the bed who's going, can't do Pilates. You can hear her giggling. And she's my sidekick. This is the wonderful Kerry, who I can't do Instagram without.
Hi, Kerry.
Hi.
Thanks for being here. So hang on. We were talking about mirrors. What was I going to say? I can't remember. You carry on.
Yeah. So the reason I got onto mirrors and Pilates and all of that, you're checking your vulval skin to see what it looks like, because and I'm not suggesting there's a frequent thing, but just get an idea about what your normal vulva looks like. Then you've got hashtag know your own normal.
That's what I was going to say. Yes. Is talking to any mothers out there.
Yeah.
And post having kids, things change quite a lot down there.
Yes.
And I don't know about anyone else out there, but I certainly did not want to look at what was going on for quite a long time. I was just like, oh, it can't be good. Yeah. So I'm not going to. And of course, then you one day might decide to look, and it does look quite different to pre-kids. So try and look at it.
Absolutely. Because then if you've done that, look at it, you've got an idea how beautiful your vulva is. Postpartum vulva, having delivered kids, is just as beautiful as the one before, just different. Know your own normal. So when you're in the shower, or when you're having a wash and you're or you get an itch in your knickers, or you're washing your vulva and you think, oh, what's that lump or bump? And you think, oh my God, oh my goodness. And then you look and you can see a change in your skin. When you go to your GP, because that's what I want you to do next, and you say, well, I've seen a new lump or bump or a change in my skin, or my skin normally looks like X, Y, or Z. Yeah. What a great reference point for the GP. Yeah. And in this new technology world, what we're getting women to do genuinely is to take photographs of vulval changes, and on secure websites. I'm not now going to have a lot of fun and games here.
That's a can of worms, Tracie.
Yeah. But it's called telemedicine, and it is what we are doing. But it is good to have a record for yourself, so that if you go and see a GP, you can keep it on your phone.
Sorry, what do people do with these pictures?
You send them to your GP on a secure email network. Is what we're doing. It's called telemedicine, and we're doing a lot of it. Actually, doing a lot of it. But if you don't feel like that, doing that, at least you've got a record of a change of the skin, which is on your password protected phone. So that if you think, oh well, it's probably nothing, and then it goes away, then it was probably nothing. If it doesn't go away, and you're starting to get worried, and actually there are lots of skin conditions of the vulva that are nothing to do with cancer, but they're itchy, they're flaky. They're unpleasant to sit on. They put you off sex. So you can't
are treatable.
So you owe it to yourself to get sorted anyway. Who wants to have an itchy vagina or an itchy vulva? So talking of vaginas now, moving slightly on, I'm not suggesting you start trying to work out what that looks like inside, because that's just, that's minus helmet and a speculum. And that's not a do-it-yourself thing. No. So how can you tell if you've got skin changes in the vagina? Usually you'll get, I'm going back to the discharge thing, your discharge will change. You might feel that when you're putting a tampon in, or your partner's putting a finger or a sex toy, or you're exploring yourself, that you find that your vagina feels different.
So when you say your discharge will change, it gets like there's more of it or less of it, or changes colour, or
changes colour and consistency. So your normal might go from clear to a yellowy to a greeny to a period to a brownie type of colour. That's your normal. You'll know your normal. We all smell a little bit too. We all have our own odour, which is normal.
Of course.
I always get it down to odour and discharge. I haven't got to poo yet, but I'm not going to, because we're not talking about bottoms. But not this time.
Another one.
But it's really, really important. Just if you know any change in what you smell about yourself, or what you see in your discharge, that's when to report. Once again, it's probably just a bacterial change or a pH change, but it's always worth getting checked, because you don't want to feel uncomfortable either. There's nothing worse than being itchy and scratchy. I've done it myself with thrush, standing when we used to give talks with my hand thinking, I can't scratch my vulva now. I called it Fanny at the time, and now it's called a vulva, being a gynae nurse. And, you know, it's not a good look.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So get it checked. And what, well, we're going to come on to screening. So hang on. Have we been through all of them now?
We have. Brilliant. Ovary, cervix, womb, vulva, vagina.
Brilliant. So screening.
Yeah.
I think most people know about cervical screening, because most people who are eligible get invited to a screening once every 3 years.
They do, at the age of 25 onwards. So
the first thing to say is don't miss it. And if anyone's got any questions about it, get in touch with the Eve Appeal. Go on their website, get in touch with Ask Eve. They will be able to answer any questions you might have about that.
Yeah.
What about the other cancers? What screening is on offer?
Okay, so sadly, we don't have any effective screening for any of the other cancers. Cervical screening saves lives, really, really does. So you're absolutely right to go. So when you go for your cervical screening, what will actually happen is your GP nurse or doctor will hopefully, and if not, do some reverse education, give them permission to talk to you about vulval skin, vaginal skin. So while they happen to be down the business end, they will see your vulva and your vagina. So there will be a coincidental check of that health. So that's a good thing, but it's not screening. The only screening we've got is cervix cancer screening. And you make a really, really good point, Arabella, in that when you go for your cervix screening, you are not being screened for any other gynae cancer. So the awareness that you're raising now, all of the other stuff, just because your smear is clear, doesn't mean you're safe from everything else. Ovarian cancer screening, we're on our way to getting an answer. So the Eve Appeal, as you know, all the money that you're raising through the sales of your lip product and all the other work that we do, so thank you for that, is going into research. And it's ovarian cancer that we're looking at, well, all of the cancers we look at, but ovarian cancer, there's an enormous trial called UK CTOX, lots of information about it on our website. But it looks as though we can separate population into those that have the BRCA gene, carry the BRCA gene alteration. We all have that gene. So it's the one that I often call it the Angelina Jolie gene. She's the lady that made it famous. Yeah. Yeah. So if you have a family history and the family carries a BRCA gene alteration, we used to call it mutation, but that's got far too negative connotations. That's something where we will start checking women more regularly, i.e. getting them to be more aware of signs and symptoms. But there isn't actually a proper screening test at the moment for ovarian cancer. The same goes for the other cancers. There's no actual screening for those cancers at the moment, so vulval and vaginal. So the big thing really is the awareness, exactly at the womb. Symptoms,
and knowing you're normal. And that's why that is, you know, the big Eve Appeal hashtag, isn't it? Know you're normal, because it's about understanding the changes and then presenting that to your GP. Okay, amazing. So I think we've slightly covered this, but what would be, if you could give everyone 3 things to take away in terms of keeping on top of their gynae health? Anyone who's watching this, what are the top 3 things? It could be 5 actually. Just tell us what you want us all to do. Go on.
Okay, so I want them to do exactly what you did in lockdown last summer. Go for your cervical screening when you're invited. I want people to do what your mum did when she got her symptoms, and that she went to the GP. She made her decisions about her treatment, which were quite right for her, but she went and reported them. I want people to know their own normal. So if you don't know, and we've said this quite a lot, but I think it's so, so important. If you don't know your own normal, how are you going to know you're abnormal? I want people to feel confident to go to the GP. Now, that's an easy one for me. I've spent half of my life in women's knickers in the nicest possible way. So I don't have any issues there. But having met that many women, I know there's a huge embarrassment stigma factor. So I want 5th, anyone who's worried, signs, symptoms, embarrassment, stigma, and sometimes there's a stigma around not knowing, pick up the phone, give me or Karen a ring, and we will help you.
Oh, so brilliant. Thank you. And just to say, with the know you're normal, within that, the sort of practical, like, how do you know you're normal? We've talked about using a mirror.
Yeah.
Looking in your knickers.
Absolutely.
What else?
Knowing so you've got your vulval skin, you've looked in the mirror. You know what your own discharge is, so that's checking your gusset, your panty liner. Know your own cycle, because cycles change all the time depending on what hormones you're taking or not taking, pregnancy, post-pregnancy. I think know your family history as well is a good one. So if you're going to a GP, everybody says there's cancer in the family. Sadly, like you with your lovely mum, most of us have had a family member who has died from a cancer. It's worth finding out which cancers.
Yes, and I should actually say, just because I sometimes think sort of personal stuff is quite helpful.
Very.
But I went to my GP a few months after my mum had died and said that I was worried about genetic factors, and because I also added into that, I had two of my lovely cousins that had breast cancer diagnosis around that time. So all of a sudden we're thinking, the females in this family, is there something going on? Thankfully we don't have the BRCA gene, but even though we don't, I am now part of a genetic screening program where I think I'm going to have yearly mammograms. So, and that's not something that would usually be on offer. I'm in my early 40s. So that is, and it's nice for me. I just feel like I'm sort of doing something about it, looking after myself a bit.
That skin product's amazing. Early 40s. Why didn't I know before?
Stop it.
I think though, absolutely, it is all those things that we've sort of covered off. It's so important. And anybody who's just not sure about anything, I can't say just what I look like now. I am absolutely taboo free. There is nothing that phases me. So just love to hear from people and help them.
Amazing. Lastly, we promised a bit of myth busting. Is there anything you'd like to bust away?
Okay, so cervix cancer and this whole thing around HPV. So a woman who gets cervix cancer is a troll, is a slag, is a slapper, is a whatever other negative connotations. Absolute, I'm going to say bollocks. It's rubbish.
Yeah, you can say bollocks. Go for it.
Exactly. Okay, we've done it now. It's absolute bollocks. HPV is a normal part of a normal man and woman's sex life. 8 out of 10 of us get it. The majority of us clear HPV. Some of us don't. It's like some of us clear a cold quickly, some of us don't. So it is normal. I've had it a couple of times in my life. I'm fairly normal. But it's part of it. So that's really, really important.
And also to say I've got a 13-year-old son.
Yes.
And they are now giving the boys the vaccine as well, not just the girls. So that's really good news. Yeah.
Super important, because it's not HPV also affects men. Head and neck cancers as well, and also the vulval cancers for us girls. So really, really important. So that's one thing I would bust. Also on cervix, as we've said before, the screening is massively important. Cervix screening, it does save lives, but it only checks for cervix cancer. So when you've done your cervical smear screening, brilliant, but remember all of the other cancers and keep an alert eye out. Yeah.
Amazing, Tracie. Thank you so much. I really feel like we've crammed a lot into that, and I'm really grateful for your time and your expertise. And just to remind everyone that the Ask Eve service is run by Tracie and by Karen, and it's just the two of them. So it really is a very, how do we describe it? Very intimate and very private service. It's completely anonymous if you want it to be, and it's for anyone. It's for anyone if you're worried about symptoms, if you're not sure about screening options. It is for relatives if you've had someone who's had a diagnosis, anyone who's got any questions at all. It is there for you to use, and the Get Lippy month is raising lots of awareness for that, and hopefully lots of funds as well. So thank you so much, everyone. I'm going to say goodbye, and thank you to Tracie, and we will see you all soon.
Thanks so much,
Bye.
everybody. Bye-bye.
Take care.